So are you optimistic or are you pessimistic? Do you feel like the glass is half full or do you feel like the glass is half empty? Today we're actually discussing both, how we can define both. And then I'll actually give you guys some techniques at the end that will actually help you guys become a more optimistic kind of person, get a different kind of viewpoint on things as opposed to that pessimistic side that we want to rid our mindset of. What's going on, guys? It's Marcus here with Discover Ignite, and today we're actually discussing optimism and pessimism and what is the difference between the two and how you can become more optimistic about things. Now, typically when we think about optimistic and pessimistic, we always think about that glass half full, glass half empty kind of viewpoint. And it really does come down to our viewpoint, right? Our perspective on the way we see things in life. Now, can we actually be a more optimistic kind of person? Yes, I believe you can be. It is something that we can change, right? It's a belief that we have that we can change. It's a viewpoint that we can change. You know, a lot of times we don't really realize that we're being pessimists, right? We don't understand this until we may actually jot down the events throughout the day and actually look on how we approach those events throughout the day, right? Are we the kind of person that looks at that event and, you know, think it's a permanent definition, right, that defines us for our identity, right? Does that make us who we are for the rest of our life? Or do we feel like, you know, that event that happened to us, is that only a temporary setback, right? Is it something we can change, something we can learn from, right? And this is something we have to keep in mind every time, you know, we're going through life. If there's a specific event that's going on in our life, we want to look at that situation, right, and analyze it after the fact, right? Because a lot of times to try to do these things, I do have techniques at the end of the video that will help you do this on the spot. But, you know, when we're actually analyzing these things after the fact, you know, we can get a better insight to how we could have handled it, right, in a more, you know, optimistic, you know, mindset. And so that's what we're discussing today, and I want to really, you know, hammer it in, really make you think about, you know, trying to be more optimistic, right? We want to live a happier life, and the best way to do that is just to be a more optimistic kind of person that, you know, things do happen for a reason, right? You have to create reason, right? But if you allow life to just keep you adrift, right? If you're not doing anything to acknowledge that, then you typically will have, you know, this drift in your life, and then you'll be hammered with all these negative things in your life, and then you typically become more pessimist, right? You believe that a lot of things in life will not work in your favor, right? Because you think of specific events in your life that, you know, are permanent, right? That define who you are, that identifies who you are, right? And this is what we're trying to steer away from. We're trying to be more positive about life. If we can be more positive about life, you know, things can always be better, right? We don't have to think that being positive is all this hoopla and unrealistic stuff. No, but it's a viewpoint, right? To actually look at life through the opportunities as opposed to all the negativities of life, right? Because the world is already filled with tons of negative things, right? And it's not hard to notice that. All you have to simply do is turn on your news feed and you see the drama, right? You see all the bad things going on in the world, but yet we fail to see all the good things that are also going on around us, right? And it all comes, again, down to our perspective and how we see things, right? Now, when you actually look at optimism and pessimism, you have to know that, yes, pessimism is good during specific times, right? So say like if you have a business and you're trying to find your niche, right? You have that idea, you know, for whatever it is, and you feel like that particular idea is going to be it, right? That's going to be, you know, the next Apple or next Amazon, whatever you think it's going to be. But the truth of the matter is you want to be more of a pessimist at that point, right? Because yes, your idea you may think is worth gold, right? So you're gonna go with this idea, it's gonna work, you're excited about it, and then, you know, 6 months come and nothing's happening. A year comes, nothing's happening. Now, why is this? Should you be more of an optimist and think that yes, it's gonna happen, it will happen as long as I keep just putting my head down and going? And my answer to you is no. At that particular point, you want to be a pessimist, right? Only in the aspect, right? Only in the aspect of the idea, right? I would always consider that your drive, your motivation, you know, your willingness to want to perhaps change the world, you know, that is an optimistic viewpoint, right? That is something that no matter what happens, you have that drive to do it, right? Maybe that was a bad idea, but you have to realize that that idea was only temporary, right? You'll find a different idea, right? And this is what it all comes down to when you're thinking about optimism and pessimism, is that do you find things as being temporary, or do you find things as being permanent? And the best way you can do that is by looking at, you know, how do you take a victory? Now, optimistic person would typically take that victory and build off that victory, right? Like, it was a good thing and I accomplished this, and I'm gonna go ahead and do, you know, try to accomplish more victories, right? Where if you're a pessimist, you're like, oh, I got lucky, and you know, because of this, this, and this, and this is why I got lucky. This is why I had the victory, right? And then you have to actually see how you deal with setbacks, right? The optimistic person thinks that a setback is a learning opportunity, right? That is only temporary. That okay, it happened, and I've learned, you know, X, Y, and Z, and I'll take that forward with me. Where a pessimist will typically think that, oh man, this thing failed, and it just reiterates all the bad things that have happened in my life, and so I'm going to define myself this way, right? I'm going to define myself as not being able to, you know, get ahead in life because of this particular event. And so these are things we need to keep in mind when looking at being optimistic and being pessimistic, right? So I've touched on some of the differences between being optimistic and being pessimistic. And the biggest thing, again, to remember here is that there are times in your life where you want to be a little pessimistic about stuff, right? You don't want to just go into something head first, especially if it's to deal with a business or a major life event. Yes, you should be optimistic about that, but you do want to look at it from a pessimistic viewpoint, right? You want to be able to come up with whatever, you know, beliefs you have in that pessimistic viewpoint, and then try to really dissect them, right? You want to try to establish some kind of risk management, right? Because you don't want to just go in being optimistic and, you know, just not thinking all the way through what is going on, right? If you do that without doing any kind of risk management, you're going to fall flat on your face, and you don't want to do that. So you want to still try to keep that pessimistic viewpoint, but you know, if it's like everyday life, if it's just interacting with people, whatever it is, you want to try to always be optimistic about as much as possible, right? But when it comes to bigger life events that may have more risk to it, you want to start, you know, coming at it with a little bit more pessimistic side and try to manage the risk. And if you feel that the risk is managed, then you need to, you know, bring that optimistic viewpoint back into perspective and start going through with it, right? Because you've, you know, narrowed down the risk, you've assessed the situation, and now you're ready to move forward. So now we come to the point to where, you know, you feel like you're being a little bit too pessimistic, right? You feel like, how do I change this on the spot? You may feel like there's a certain situation where you feel like your viewpoint is really just tainted, and you start getting these negative thoughts, and it's just overwhelming, right? And you don't want to lead them to more negative thoughts. So how do you actually change this on the spot? How do you address it on the spot? And the easiest way to actually do this is, there's multiple ways, right? But the first thing you can do is try to just, as soon as you can, if you're a self-aware person, you can tell yourself, stop, right? You can actually even drop an index card that says stop and pull that out, right? As soon as you start feeling negative thoughts in there, when that, you know, pessimistic viewpoint coming in, you're gonna pull that stop card out and you look at it, right? And that leads me into, you know, my next tip. What you can actually do is, when you find these negative thoughts, right, you want to focus on something, find a distraction and focus on that, right? And the easiest way to do this is, like, say you're just sitting at your desk and you have negative thoughts, right? What would you do at this point? At this point, when you want to change those negative thoughts, then you pick up your pencil, pick up a pen, pick up whatever's there, pick up your coffee mug, and just look at it, right? Just how does that object feel? How does that object look? How does that object maybe smell? You know, just use a distraction to get your mind away from those pessimistic viewpoints, right? And you'll find that this distraction, our brain loves distraction. So by distracting it, you're actually distracting it from these negative thoughts. And then you can, you know, follow up with more positive thoughts, right? Possibly even doing some affirmations or whatever to get that negative thought out of your mind. Now, the next one I actually have, if none of that actually works for you, if that's not something you want to do, the next one that is actually a really good one as well is to, you know, have a rubber band around your wrist. And when you feel like, man, I've got these really negative thoughts and I just can't stop it, you know, as soon as you find yourself, as soon as you're aware that you're thinking that negative thought, take that rubber band and, you know, smack it against your skin as hard as you can, right? And it just distracts you again, because this is ultimately what you want to do, is distract your mind from these negative thoughts. And by hitting that rubber band, you know, you're going to be thinking about, man, that hurt, right? You're not going to be thinking about negative thoughts anymore. And then you can follow it up with positive affirmations and just get those negative thoughts out of your head and keep on, you know, allowing yourself to have that positive perspective and continue forward. So if you know somebody that can get something out of this video, please share it with them. Also, if you did enjoy this video, smash that like button. And until next time, I will see you guys later.